West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Tonight, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell blasting corporations for taking sides in the voting law debate as Major League Baseball announces it's officially moving the All-Star game to Denver from Atlanta in protest of Georgia's new voting law.
Republicans buy stock and fly on planes and drink Coca-Cola too. So what I'm saying here is I think this is quite stupid to jump in the middle of a highly controversial issue, particularly when they got their facts wrong.
Okay, yet the hypocrisy is palpable for McConnell. He has spent years, a career, fighting to raise money from corporations for political causes. And in fact, he's filed lawsuits to allow more corporate money in politics. And here's what he said in 2012.
But let's be very clear, no individual or group in this country should have to face harassment or intimidation or incur crippling expenses defending themselves against their own government simply because that government doesn't like the message that they're advocating.
Well, McConnell doesn't like the message they're advocating now, and he is, of course, the most senior Republican in Washington. He is certainly a big part of the government. So I guess when he doesn't like the message, it's okay to intimidate the corporations. Out front now, longtime Republican donor Dan Eberhardt. Also, he is the CEO of Canary, an oil field services company. Also with me, of course, are Dana Bash. So, Dan, what do you make of what McConnell is doing here?
Well, I think McConnell is an expert at draining corporations' coffers, but he wants these companies on the Republican side of the fence, or at the very least, giving to both parties. So the fact that corporations are parroting Democratic talking points and siding with the Democrats has got to scare Mitch McConnell and his pocketbook to death, frankly.
So, Dana, McConnell was asked today whether companies should give up political donations, right? Just to be consistent, right? If he's saying they shouldn't play a role in politics, then, hey, how about cutting off those donations? But as Dan's saying, the expert in draining corporate coffers, you said it in a more memorable way than I said it, Dan. Let me just play McConnell for you.
I'm not talking about political contributions. Most of them contribute to both sides. They have political action committees. That's fine. It's legal. It's appropriate. I support that.
So, Danny, he's got no problem with political contributions continuing to flow, but he has a problem when corporations speak out not on his side.
Yeah, well, that's what it appears. Look,
sorry, go ahead, Dana. I'm sorry. I didn't realize your names were so similar.
That's okay.
Dana,
our names are very similar.
Yeah.
So when you go back to the argument that Mitch McConnell made, because he isn't just saying this now. I mean, he was and still is at the tip of the spear, the number one advocate for Citizens United, which opened the floodgates of corporate America being allowed to spend unlimited sums of money in campaigns. The argument that he made was that it's a First Amendment right, that they should be able to speak out and to be a part of the process. So it's really hard to understand why that is a right, and they don't have the same right to speak out when they decide for their own, within their own companies. In this case, it's the MLB deciding as a company that we want to make a First Amendment statement and say, we don't like this new Georgia voting law. We think it's restrictive, so we're going to move.
So corporations are people until...
it's just very hard to make them...
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
They're people when it comes to their money, but not when it comes to their point of view. I mean, right, it's completely inconsistent. But Dan, you're from Georgia. So this just happened. You probably haven't seen it yet. Former President Trump just has put out a statement, and he is slamming the Republican governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp. He's always looking for an excuse to do that. For the wins that Trump says Democrats got in the new law. Trump says, quote, Kemp also caved to the radical left-wing woke mob who threatened to call him racist if he got rid of weekend voting. Well, he kept it, and they still called him racist. Now, obviously, Dan, there's nuance in the law, and I'm not trying to get into that discussion. It's more the question of Trump weighing in on this, saying boycott the MLB, slamming Kemp, taking a side. Is he doing more harm than good by making himself such a central player?
Well, I think, clearly to go back to 2 minutes ago, McConnell's got kind of more nuanced language and a veiled threat and a shot across the bow. Trump's going for the full frontal assault. He seems to consistently want a civil war within the GOP in the state of Georgia, which I think is harmful for all. Trump is trying to stay relevant and to stir up a mess here. I think that this law has got a little bit of good stuff for folks, for voters in Georgia, and a lot of bad stuff, and really should have been more thought through before it was passed. But Kemp has stood behind it, but Trump is really trying to weigh in and stay relevant, and it's really going to cause a lot of chaos and a lot of economic harm to Georgia, the way I see it. Look, as a Georgian, as somebody from Georgia, and as somebody that wants Atlanta and the metro area to do well, we need to keep the All-Star game in Atlanta. We need to not have boycotts. We need more business in Atlanta. And this law is drawing the wrong kind of attention to the state of Georgia.
Dana, President Biden said today
and I'm sure he would... Just real quick, I'm sure he would agree with me that the other part of the Trump statement was trying to keep the governor, Kemp, from having any political benefit among Republicans with this law because it is personal. Trump really despises that governor because he blames him, as you saw in part of that statement, for his loss in Georgia.
I mean, it is incredible, Dan, right? Like anything to take down Brian Kemp, right? That's a personal vendetta. To Dana's point, it's clear.
The president really wants to see Doug Collins or some other very viable, high-profile person in Georgia take on Brian Kemp in the primary, and he's really trying to keep that path open and alive by trying to keep Brian Kemp's numbers down in the Republican Party in the state of Georgia. And that's really the subtext of what's going on here.
It is Wednesday, the 7th of April of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Oh, it's only Eggs Benedict, okay? Please. But it also alludes to the meddlesome priests that seem to get in our way. Oh, my. The priests that are the most meddlesome here in our society really aren't priests so much, though there is a segment of them that are indeed in that group. But I would say the religious meddlesome types tend to come from white evangelical realms. Or is it a realm? I don't know. They have all sorts of different interpretations, so that's why I say realms. And looks like the polling pulls it out. The Reuters Ipsos poll showing that fully half of the Republican Party believes that, what happened on January 6th was so peaceful, and the only violence was by Antifa. Look at them. Okay. I call it Russian brainwashing, but it's a little more insidious than that. It might be the lead in the pipes. And we'll get into that later on in the show. Of course, we will. Anyway, so we have a problem here, Houston. We have a problem. Do we really expect to make nice with 71 million people? No, I guess you could say that you could knock that number down a few from 71 mil who voted for Trump as being, well, pretty much unredeemable. We're not going to be able to save them. That's too sizable of a number just to give up, obviously. Anyway, there's some that we're just, going along to get along. Nazi Germany certainly put up roadblocks so that, well, for the most part, Nazism would be held in check. And one way of doing that was, having a commission to really find out what the hell just happened. Well, they knew what was happening because they saw it with their own eyes while it was happening. And, the supposed ignorant few who didn't have any idea about that camp just outside of town, that pretty much drove the economy of the region because of the slave labor held within. When they saw the actual cogs of the machine in the mass graves and the ovens, you see those great grainy photos, black and white. The blonde German ladies crying, oh my God. And then the Allied powers made them, dig the graves. Move all the bodies. So they would have visceral memory of, what they had done. But another codified legal aspect was the Nuremberg Tribunal, and I don't remember any Nazis sitting on the Nuremberg Tribunal. Okay? So if we're going to get a January 6th commission, this bipartisan BS does not work. You can't have a bipartisan commission with the Nazis that tried to overthrow the government. I know Rich Lowry's going to say that I'm just credited for calling them Nazis. Yeah, he came out today and said, Jim Crow, anybody invoking Jim Crow just discredited themselves, just like how anybody saying they're Nazis just discredited themselves. Yeah, well, you know what? The Nazis marched on Charlottesville, okay? And it was about Jim Crow. So F you, Lowry, you Jim Crow Nazi sympathizer. Anyway, there were no Nazis sitting on the Nuremberg Tribunal. So we're not attempting, I don't think an attempt to have a bipartisan commission is where we need to go. I think an independent commission might be a more, reasonable path to take. Independent. I know that it's going to be totally impossible for someone outside of our government to be able to come in here because we don't listen to what the world says. We don't want to be a part of the world court because then we might have to follow the law. We're exceptional Americans. We make the law. And the world follows us. We don't follow the world. We got to stop that kind of thinking too. All right? Maybe it's not so much that we're following the world, we're just following the law, capital L. So we need an independent commission. How that will be constructed, well, when I was younger, I was a lot more arrogant. I would never say better minds than me because I was one of those better minds in the mind of, me. Now I'm a lot more wise to at least make that claim. Ugh. Yeah, better minds than me will know how to properly construct this independent commission. Now I have some ideas because I still have a bit of that arrogance left from my youth. But no one listens to me. We need some giants to push an independent commission. I like the idea that there's 140 former statesmen and I believe some military, writing a letter. Because what has happened now, of course, is that the Republicans, now I call them Nazis, lovingly, shall we say. And they've shut down the idea of a commission. Nancy Pelosi is going to have to now go into some subcommittee strategy to be able to get any kind of investigation about what the hell went on January 6th that happened right before our eyes and for the world to see. That now fully half of the GOP believes was peaceful. And if there was any violence, it was because of Antifa. And white supremacy doesn't exist in America, and you better tell all those black people if they don't get off our backs. It's just crazy town. I know people are going to get mad at me now because, I'm saying that all crazy people are bad. No, I'm not saying that. But the bad people who are crazy doing this kind of BS, I don't know. It's not rational, shall we say. Or it is very rational and has a means to an end. I often jokingly refer to it as, selling out the country to Vlad. Somebody's making some money off of it. And it sure ain't us. Anyway, it's not about the money. That's the problem that the prosperity gospel white evangelical cannot grasp. Everything is transactional, I got to do something good for God to get into heaven. And what is doing good for God? I don't think locking up kids in icebox baby gulags and then saying, Joe's doing it too, is the way to heaven. But who am I? I mean, this is metaphysics. I know metaphysics might actually be a topic of conversation and discussion here in the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we put in a little bit of it along the way, don't we? Anyway, let's get back to the more curated aspect of the show, because we could just go on and on and on. And I have been lately. What is happening? Well, we got a lot to say, but we also have a lot to report. And to, you can go and delve into the show notes and links and read the more comprehensive and full reportage from the sources. But today, on Smothered Benedict Wednesdays here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, well, at the top, old Mitch McConnell. Man. Oh, Mitch McConnell. Boy, the GOP insists that corporations are people, my friend. Unless corporations lobby for free and fair elections, then they are no friend of the GOP. I just had to get that out there. Anyway, Mitch McConnell. If we play our cards right, because I don't understand. Mitch McConnell and the GOP are whining about something that we've pretty much been whining about ourselves. But if we play our cards right, we might be able to strip the Major League Baseball of their antitrust exemptions and overturn Citizens United. We might be able to do it. It is really funny, though, that at the point that corporations go, we are kind of treading down this Jim Crow Nazi path. Maybe we don't want to go there. Because anybody who has read any history has always questioned if only enough of private business in Nazi Germany had said, "No, you Nazis, we're not backing you." No, they backed the Nazis because they wanted to make some money. Granted, they were in a deep depression and they needed to generate some sort of market. So let's start a world war. That'll increase profits. If enough of private business and the big corporations, if Bayer, for instance, had told the Nazis, "No, we're not going to be part of your death camp gas regimen," some things could have been entirely different. All right? The only way Nazism worked was because of a melding of private corporation, private business, and the state. So I think that the more enlightened aspects of American business, because, when you get down to it, we are Americans. We're not Nazis. There's still enough of us who have family members that we remember quite fondly that may have only died a few years ago who were part of keeping the Nazis from taking over the world. And it was a big deal. They considered it to be a pretty darn big deal. It encompassed the whole world. Lest we forget. On the rest of the menu, experts warn the $16.8 million data mining contract that ICE penned with LexisNexis will criminalize immigrants. Well, that's a feature, not a bug. Americans may finally get lead-free, safer drinking water after years of GOP stonewalling. Yeah, what is it about the GOP lobbying for the lead pipe industry? I don't understand that. And Senate Democrats proposed major shifts to Trump's 2017 tax reforms that encourage companies to move operations and, more importantly, profits overseas. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Brazil's brutal surge in COVID-19 deaths is a biological Fukushima. And Iran held constructive talks with the world's major powers on reviving the 2015 nuclear deal. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who is, I gotta tell you, pretty darn busy. And so we appreciate all that she puts in for us here at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Kelly. If you would then look across the page to the left there, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will hopefully find the Patreon link, and that is there because, well, we ask for money every day that we do this show. And why? Because they keep raising the prices on everything. The bills keep going up. How dare they? Man. And though the bulk of how we do this comes out of our own wallets, we would be unable to do it without you. And there are those of you who have been helping us for 10 years. Yes, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. It's our birthday this year. It started just, a mere several weeks ago. A month. Anyway, we have been going 24/7, 365 for 10 years, and we've been able to do it because of your generosity. And I want to plug again the people who have recently just increased their generous patronage. It has come at a very, it's come at a good time. There's no other way to put it, since bills keep increasing. How dare they? Anyway, as long as we pay our bills, we have found over these 10 years of 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio broadcasting is that we can fly under the radar when we pay our bills, and then we can continue to fulfill our civic duty of Resistance Radio as the founders originally intended, so many years ago. And that was longer than 10. Okay? And thank you so much for that generosity, and thank you for considering your generosity in the future. Oh, I should have mentioned that if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send the funds that you would spend on a latte, we then put those monies in with ours, and that's how we do it. So thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and so much more as well. And he's pretty darn busy, not just in his life, but also in his life. So thank you, Tom. If you would follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, well, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. I put that up on Twitter and other social media. And as I mentioned earlier, check those show notes and links, because that's where the source material is that we use as a springboard to do whatever it is that we do. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Alrighty, let's see. We had a bit of drama yesterday. We were having such a lovely day. It wasn't very breezy too much. It was, light and variable as predicted. And it was very nice, and the air was clean, down to about 20 parts per million, which is good. I keep track of these because my mom has, COPD. Anyway, suddenly we started hearing all sorts of sirens. Now, if sirens will echo and resonate up from the freeway, and it's sort of like in a little canyon, the way all these ridges are ridged in this particular area. But then it was the familiar honk of a big fire truck, and there was a lot of them. So we had a bit of a grass fire going not very far from here, which is concerning because I would like not to have wildfires this year. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it? So we don't know how it started. Seems like things are still fairly green. But I guess out there in the wild, things are starting to dry up. And it is only April. We're still supposed to have April showers. Where are they? They were predicted, then suddenly they went away. Come on, give us our April showers. Of course, you get those April showers, and what does it bring? May flowers. And then what does it bring in September? A bunch of dry vegetation that can go up in smoke. And before that happens, it's flames that destroys human life, too. As well as with all the other wildlife out there. And I guess, we're the wildlife as well. Look how we act. Jeez. So that was the drama. Fortunately, they knocked it down. I don't know how many fire departments came, or regional first responder types, but it seemed like a lot. And what I saw on the town Facebook page, there was quite a lineup of various municipalities helping out. So thankfully, yes, that was a bit too close, and I would like to have a respite from that. And when we get to the weather, we'll find out what the air quality is then, because it wasn't very good when I first got up this morning when I checked. So let's, all that stated, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And it's by Amy Lou, out of the American Independent. A well-known legal and data brokerage firm signed a $16.8 million contract earlier this year to sell people's information to ICE. And that drew swift backlash from advocates who say the move could adversely harm immigrants. LexisNexis, a robust tool used for scholarly and legal research, said it provides 10,000 data points on hundreds of millions of people as part of its risk solution services. Really? The contract was first reported by The Intercept, which received documents from the February 25 deal from the immigrant advocacy group Mayenta. Personal data now shared between the two entities could include people's credit history and any bankruptcy records, license plate numbers, mobile phone information, which, The Intercept noted, could be used to locate and arrest immigrants. First they came for the immigrants, but we didn't care because we're a bunch of racists. And then they came for us. And then we said, no more baseball. We don't want no more baseball. I don't know, that's far afield, isn't it? Literally. Back to the article at hand. Mayenta's field director, Jacinta Gonzalez, told the outlet that the data-sharing contract could create paranoia and fear among non-citizens. You might be in a city where your local politician is trying to tell you, don't worry, you're welcome here. But then ICE can get your address from a data broker and go directly to your house and try to deport you. You know, ICE is a rogue agency. You know that, don't you? They've been actively working against the interests of the Biden administration. And I know Mayorkas has been trying to rein them in, but boy, are there a lot of Nazis in ICE? Now, I might say in the DHS, but, the DHS is a much more far-flung, multi-agency entity of it, in and of itself. ICE is its own thing. So, we need a purge, I would say. Gonzalez continued, your state might be down to give you a driver's license, but that information might get into the hands of a data broker. You might feel like you're in a life or death situation and have to go to the hospital, but you're concerned that if you can't pay your bill, a collection agency is going to share that information with ICE. Previously, Thomson Reuters Risk Industry Service, called Clear, provided data to ICE, but that contract ended this year. The New York Times noted in 2019 that the information from Clear was effective in aiding the agency with deportations of non-citizens. Other immigrant groups have also forcefully pushed against the LexisNexis and ICE contract. But LexisNexis Risk Solutions spokesperson Jennifer Richmond defended the contract, telling The Intercept, our tools contain data primarily from public government records. Yeah, and then you consolidate them so people can easily find them all in one place. ICE did not respond for comment by the time of publication. Across the nation, states have moved to end data sharing with ICE. In February, Colorado state lawmakers introduced a bill to prohibit the state from using personal information for immigration enforcement. The Virginia State House on the 3rd of February passed a bill to protect the personal data of drivers in the state. Immigration advocates said ICE agents have used this data to identify and deport immigrants in the past. And states with existing laws that limit information released to ICE include California, New York, New Jersey, and Washington State. Provencher of The American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Long-awaited clean water reform could finally be coming to American cities after years of Republican stonewalling, thanks to President Joe Biden's American Jobs Plan. And because Senate Democrats have been given the green light to use the process of budget reconciliation to pass the upcoming infrastructure bill, it could happen without a single Republican vote. And that could be critical, as Republicans in the Senate have already said they will try to block the legislation. The $2 trillion jobs and infrastructure package contains several allocations specifically designated for water reform to the tune of $111 billion. First, it provides $45 billion in grants to replace lead pipes throughout the country, reducing toxic and dangerous lead exposure, not only in American homes whose water is still siphoned through lead pipes, but in 400,000 U.S. schools and daycare centers, too. It is one of the most critical issues addressed in Biden's infrastructure plan. Many homes built before 1986 are fitted with lead pipes, and water traveling through older corroded pipes can become contaminated with the toxic metal. In adults, lead poisoning can cause high blood pressure, miscarriage and premature birth, and memory loss. Since children absorb more lead than adults do when this occurs, lead exposure is particularly harmful to infants and young children, often leading to hearing loss and severe developmental delays. I might interject, when we took lead out of the gasoline, the crime rate dropped. And there were studies to find a correlation from that. And you know what's weird? The GOP suppressed the studies. Why would they do that? While Republicans continue to falsely claim that Biden's bill contains too many line items extraneous to infrastructure, which they are incorrectly defining as only roads and bridges, and have slammed it for containing water and energy infrastructure funding. Yeah, well, I guess having water and energy in America is like some sort of commie plot to make America great again. According to data from the U.S. Water Alliance, more than 2 million Americans live without running water and flushing toilets, including 1.5 Americans whose homes lack water access, 250,000 Puerto Rico residents, and 553,000 homeless Americans. Many inequities in water access, racial, socioeconomic, and geographic, continue to affect the country, with indigenous Americans 19 times more likely to lack indoor plumbing. 17% of rural Americans have trouble accessing clean running water, and 23% of private wells polluted with dangerous chemicals like arsenic, or uranium, or how about E. coli? The U.S. Water Alliance also notes that in 1977, most funding for water and water waste systems, 63%, came through the federal government. Currently, that number is below 9%. And the issue is urgent, with up to 10 million Americans still getting water through lead pipes and thousands of regions across the country suffering detrimental health impacts as a result. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency noted that there is no safe, acceptable level of lead in human bloodstreams, and that it is particularly dangerous for children. Nevertheless, Republicans have pledged to vote against the infrastructure bill, claiming it contains wasteful line items, like getting lead out of pipes so that it stops poisoning our children. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Top Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee proposed major shifts in former President Donald Trump's 2017 tax reforms to eliminate what they say are incentives for companies to move operations overseas and shift profits to tax haven countries. The plan, proposed by Democratic Senators Ron Wyden, my senator, Sherrod Brown, and Mark Warner, parallels some of the corporate tax hike proposals announced last week by President Joe Biden to finance $2 trillion in U.S. infrastructure investment. The senators are targeting provisions in the landmark 2017 Tax and Jobs Act that govern how companies' foreign income is taxed. The global intangible low-taxed income system, the foreign-derived intangible income tax, and the base erosion and anti-abuse tax. The systems were aimed at returning companies' deferred offshore income to the United States at lower tax rates, where those profits could be invested in American jobs. But in practice, they created new incentives for companies to invest more overseas to take advantage of new exemptions. The Democratic plan would not repeal those taxes, but modify them to equalize their rates and move them closer to the main corporate rate. In addition, the plans would create new incentives for investment in research and headquarter jobs in the United States. The proposal will likely face strong opposition from Republicans who have criticized Biden's plans to roll back their party's signature Trump-era legislative achievement as putting U.S. companies at a competitive disadvantage. It could pass with only Democratic votes as part of Biden's larger infrastructure plan, but this would require all 50 Senate Democrats to support it. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Dressed to Kill, literally. Horror satire is not a new genre. However, horror is satire sending up capitalism from the aspect of economic and environmental justice is pretty fresh, and for this reason, the new Canadian horror film Slacks deserves a look. Set in a non-pandemic 2020, Slacks follows a day in the working life of Libby, a new retail hire who's thrilled to have landed a position at the uber-hip chain store CCC. Unlike other stores, it's suggested that at CCC, people can shop their way to saving the earth and look cool doing it. Libby's first day just happens to be the day before the launch of an ultra-cool line of jeans, which will not only make anyone look fabulous, but are also grown from fair trade organic cotton and sewn under humane conditions. If it sounds too good to be true, we soon learn that it is. Straight out of real life, it seems that CCC contracts both the factories and the fields from where the products and materials originate, and doesn't actually know how the workers are treated. But hey, it makes for good advertising, as evidenced by the excitement over a scheduled appearance of a social media influencer whose approval could lead to huge profits for the chain. However, unbeknownst to all, one pair of the new jeans on the store's shelves is possessed by the angry spirit of a contractor who died under gruesome circumstances and is bent on revenge. Director Elza Kephart revels in the low-budget look that have made slacker retail films hits in the past, but unlike those, the issues raised in Slacks leave you to wonder, who's really making and paying the price for your discount clothes? It's a haunting question that has nothing to do with the supernatural. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Let's say you have a dog, or maybe you're watching a friend's pup. You have a treat in your hand, so you have the dog's attention. Then you put the treat into a doggy-proof box and let them figure it out. What do you think the dog will do? If you're a dog owner, you probably know. Spike or Spot or Miss Fluffy will probably try in vain for a while. But soon they'll probably turn back to you with those puppy dog eyes, with a look that's both hurt, why would you make it so hard for them after all, and pleading. That, it turns out, is a sophisticated cognitive phenomenon called referential communication. It's an attempt to shift the human's attention towards the problem. And dogs, as it turns out, aren't the only species who can do this. In 2003, a Hungarian biologist named Adam Miklósi tested this ability with an experiment. He gathered a handful of dogs and a group of wolves. Both groups of canines had been hand-raised from birth by people in much the same way. He put a piece of food inside of that doggy-proof box. The wolves kept trying and failing to get the food inside, And we already know what the dogs did. Alan McElligott, an animal cognition researcher at the City University of Hong Kong, wanted to push this test further. He wanted to move beyond dogs versus wolves.
The discussions of those papers and the discussion in the press is all about them being domesticated closely by humans.
He thinks that there's more to the story. What if animals don't need to be domesticated, but instead simply need to be socialized? Maybe it's not that dogs are especially social, but instead that wolves are just especially stubborn.
So we came along in 2016 and did the work on goats and showed that actually it's probably a general domestic animal thing. It's nothing to do with being domesticated as a companion animal.
In a new study, he's gone even further. Enter kangaroos.
And kangaroos generally haven't been used for any of that sort of research. I think most people, when I emailed them and suggested, this problem-solving task with with kangaroos, they thought I was kind of a bit mad or some really eccentric scientist.
McElligott rounded up a group of marsupials from 3 different zoos and sanctuaries. In all, he tested 3 different species: Kangaroo Island kangaroos, eastern gray kangaroos, and red kangaroos. Of 11 animals tested, 10 of them passed, turning their gaze back to McElligott. And of the 10 who turned to look at him, 9 kangaroos actively shifted their gaze between the box and the human. The results were published in December in the journal Biology Letters.
This domestication hypothesis for all these behaviors, we've over-relied on it. And I'm not saying that, kangaroos are just as good as dogs or anything like that. But I'm saying the cognitive capabilities of wild animals that are habituated to humans have probably been underestimated.
McElligott says that it's not enough to study domesticates and their wild counterparts like dogs and wolves. That's why he decided to try kangaroos, which were never domesticated.
You can't deduce the effects of domestication on animal behavior, animal cognition by only studying domesticated animals. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but it's important. So you need to see what the other ones are capable of doing if they're used to being around people.
McElligott says that the pouched marsupials offer up a whole new set of possibilities for understanding the evolution of social cognition. And he's now turned his attention to yet another unexpected species, the Asian water buffalo. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1803. That was the day utopian socialist and women's rights activist Flora Tristan was born. She's also remembered as the grandmother of painter Paul Gauguin. Mario Vargas Llosa most recently popularized her life in the 2003 novel The Way to Paradise. Her family was aristocratic, but she grew up in poverty outside of Paris. The young Flora found work in an engraving shop and married the shop artisan, André Chazal. Together they had 3 children. When the marriage became violent, she left him, though divorce was impossible. By some accounts, she became a maid for the wealthy and traveled Europe. It was through her travels that she became a socialist. She witnessed abject poverty and inequality in too many countries and was drawn to the work of the utopian socialists. Tristan campaigned for the right of divorce and wrote at length of worker struggles on the cusp of industrialization. Her novels, which confronted women's inequality and workers' rights, appeared in the late 1830s. She regularly visited feminist and socialist salons in Paris where ideas linking social transformation and women's rights were popular. Her most well-known work of nonfiction is The Workers' Union, which appeared in 1843. In it, Tristan argues that craft guilds could no longer adequately represent workers in an era of industrialization. She envisioned an international union of workers that organized regardless of skill level, a union that took on broader issues of social justice. Tristan also tied the advancement of women to the advancement of workers. She believed that discrimination against women only strengthened anti-worker forces. Workers and women had to take up each other's causes in order to win true justice. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River. In the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Brr! There is some crispy white stuff on people's roofs. Well, the roofs that are nicely insulated. That's how you tell. And but we're going to have plenty of sunshine today, not quite as warm as yesterday. Apparently we'll only be in the low 70s rather than the high 70s yesterday. Winds are very calm at the moment, but they will be picking up out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy overnight, and with lows in the mid to upper 30s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10. With considerable clouds early tomorrow, decreasing later in the day. Highs only in the low 60s. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have now increased from their 9,400 yesterday, which was the updated total from the weekend, by the way. We now have 33 more infections in Jackson County, though the deceased number remains the same at 123. Grass pollen is rated as low right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 21 parts per million. And that's actually good because we had that fire, and apparently the local air quality monitor is monitoring quite low parts per million. So that's good for now. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.16 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 91%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 44 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 50 degrees and sunny. Rome is 55 and fair. Kyiv is 32 degrees with a wintry mix. Kabul is 54 and fair. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 55 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 68 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 47 and mostly cloudy with a fog advisory and a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. So do take care. And New York is 58 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Pedro Fonseca of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Brazil's brutal surge in COVID-19 deaths will soon surpass the worst of a record January wave in the United States, with fatalities climbing for the first time above 4,000 a day yesterday, Tuesday, as the outbreak overwhelms hospitals. Brazil's overall death toll trails only the U.S. outbreak, with nearly 337,000 killed, compared with more than 550,000 dead in the United States. But with Brazil's healthcare system at the breaking point, the country could exceed total U.S. deaths, despite having a population two-thirds that of the U.S. It's a nuclear reactor that has set off a chain reaction, and it is out of control. It's a biological Fukushima, said Miguel Nicolais, a Brazilian doctor and professor at Duke University who is closely tracking the virus. On Tuesday, the health ministry reported another 4,195 COVID-19 deaths in the past 24 hours, well above the country's prior single-day record. With mass vaccinations curtailing the U.S. outbreak, Brazil has become the epicenter of the pandemic, contributing about 1 in 4 deaths per day globally, according to a Reuters analysis. President Bolsonaro has pushed back against mask wearing and lockdowns that public health experts consider the best way to lessen virus transmission. The country dragged its feet last year as the world raced to secure vaccines, slowing the launch of a national immunization program. Despite the recent surge, Brazilian officials are insistent that the country can soon return to something resembling business as usual.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Francois Murphy, Parisa Hafizi, John Irish, and Arshad Muhammad of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Iran and the world powers held what they described as constructive talks yesterday, Tuesday, and agreed to form working groups to discuss the sanctions Washington might lift and the nuclear curbs Tehran might observe as they try to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. European intermediaries have started shuttling between Iranian and U.S. officials in Vienna as they seek to bring both countries back into compliance with the accord, which lifted sanctions on Iran in return for curbs to its nuclear program. Former U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the deal in 2018, prompting Iran to steadily overstep the accord's limits on its program, designed to make it harder to develop an atomic bomb, an ambition Tehran denies. The talks included a meeting of the remaining parties to the original deal, Iran, Britain, China, France, Germany, and Russia, in a group called the Joint Commission that is chaired by the EU, and the United States did not attend. While neither Washington nor Tehran say they expect any quick breakthroughs from the talks, both they and the EU described the early exchanges in positive terms. Constructive Joint Commission meetings, there's unity and ambition for a joint diplomatic process with two expert groups on nuclear implementation and sanctions lifting, said EU Chief Coordinator Enrique Mora. The two expert-level groups have been given the task of marrying lists of sanctions that the U.S. could lift with obligations Iran should meet, and reporting back on Friday when the Joint Commission will meet again. A resolution of the nuclear issue could help ease tensions in the Middle East, notably between Iran and Israel. as well as with U.S. Sunni Arab allies such as Saudi Arabia, who fear the possibility of Shiite Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. And we'll meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.